Hello and welcome to another Wellness Wander. Today I'm stood in front of this magnificent backdrop at the Terrace Garden, which is between the Glasshouse range and the fountain. Our wander today will begin in the Terrace Garden, where I'll show you some of the plants from New Zealand that are growing in this spot. And we'll then head towards the Glasshouse bays and take a look at the plants from other regions of the world. We're starting this week's wander at the Terrace Garden, which at the moment is sitting in early morning shade. But you can still see some of the textures and forms that delight in this area of the garden. As we enter, you can just make out the pendant form of this selection of SEQUOIADENDRON GIGANTEUM. And it's worth also stopping to admire ABIES PINSAPO in the background. But the rest of the planting here in the Terrace Garden is all from New Zealand. So it gives a really interesting insight into the forms and evolution of the plants from this area of the world. So here we have the dense mound forming Muehlenbeckia complexa. And Brachyglottis compacta here with Carex sector. Just all melding together to create a beautifully intertwined planting. And then nestled at the bottom of the Terrace Garden is this lovely water feature, which really helps give a wonderful relaxing spot for contemplation away from the worries of the world. And heading up out of the kind of dell here, past one of the restios, this is another New Zealand species, APODASMIA SIMILIS, who's rather like a grass, or Carex. Past the arching stems of CORTADERIA, FULVIDA, and on up out of this hollow towards the glasshouses, and just catching a little bit of early morning sunlight. So here you can see mounds of this wonderful Achena inermis, which is a great ground coverer and is covered in these wonderful spiky seed heads. And if you actually wander through these, you're very likely to end up with socks full of these prickly little critters. But en masse, it really does create a wonderful effect, as you can see here. And then just picking out in the light here, PODOCARPUS nivalis, or the ALPINE TOTARA, which is an evergreen species, and behind it the very, very spiky Aciphylla colensoi. And just glancing across in the background, we can see more Cortaderias or pampas. This is Cortaderia fulvida. Just taking in down here, again in the front of the plantings, DIANELLA NIGR, which is a blueberry. Again, spiky forms of CORDYLINE INDIVISA, and emerging through the Achena here to great effect is LIBERTIA PEREGRINANS, with this kind of sharp, zingy green blade of leaf with an orange central spine. Just an extraordinary plant. And to finish with the dome-like hummocks of Muehlenbeckia astonii, which for much of the year looks very, very subtle and uninteresting, though has this extraordinary adaptation which many species from New Zealand have, of this almost zigzagging type stem. And if you look very, very closely, you can actually see that it is in flower at the moment. Tiny, tiny, minute flowers which really beg you to look closely at them. And before we head to the glasshouse bays, we're just going to step back and look and enjoy the early morning sunlight just creeping through into the terrace garden, and turn to have a look across the main lawn, taking in the bee borders, as for our last wander on the systematic beds, the grass was absolutely parched and very, very dry and brown. Since then we've had some rain, and you can see the effects. It's immediately greened up the lawn, so we're delighted to have a bit of freshness back in the garden. And we're now in the glasshouse bays in the South American bay, which is between the arid lands house and the tropical wetlands. And here you'll find a selection of cacti and succulents, many from tropical or South America or the deserts of North America. You can see the extraordinary spines and spiny forms they have. So here we have the cow's tongue cactus, one of the Opuntias, Opuntia ENGELMANNII var LINDHEIMERI. You can just see these beautiful red fruits developing. And perhaps of interest now, Dasylirion texanum, which has this wonderful flower spike typical of many of the members of asparagus family to which this belongs. And just heading out past, or beneath even, the flower spike of Dasylirion acrotrichum. And along past the tropical wetlands, and if you're lucky you'll be able to peer in here and just make out the pepper pot seed heads of the lotus Nelumbo, and a flower head just developing. And we'll peer into the Asian bay past Ceratostigma wilmotianum, which is one of the hardy plumbagos, which has this beautiful intense blue colouring. Heading along particularly to this corner to take in a Butylon nabob with this deep red colour, and also a member of the pea family, Fabaceae, Erythrina christogalli. Past the beautiful rice paper plant Tetrapanax papyrifer, which is from Japan. And pausing to just take in the contrasting foliage here in this corner, which is dominated by, in the background, Musa basjoo, or the Japanese banana, and the red foliage here of another of the bananas, Ensete ventricosa. And to admire the papery flowers of Dahlia murkii, and also some of the later flowers of the brilliant red Dahlia coccinea against the emerging flower spikes of Salvia confertiflora. And the highly scented blooms of Cestrum parkii. And the wonderful flowers here of another pea. This is Caesalpinia gerardii. Just now strolling past Verbena bonariensis, Verbena rigida, which is the shorter form of Verbena grown here, and the last flowers of one of the poppies, Pneumonia fumarifolia. We're now at the head of the other South American bay, which concentrates really on herbaceous perennials rather than cacti and succulent. And here, tucked away in this area, you can see the beautiful fan-like leaves of the blue fan palm Brahia amata, and emerging or erupting above it, the stems of another member of the pea family. This is Amicia zygomeris, and it has these beautiful attractive bracts which protect the flowers, which will come much later if the weather is good to us. And then as we head through the bay, you'll see here that we have a number of wonderful salvias. So these are members of the mint family Lamiaceae. So this is Salvia involucrata Bethelii. Past the scarlet blooms of Salvia elegans, which when rubbed emits pineapple fragrance. Here we have some of the later flowers of Lobelia laxiflora. More salvia. This is Salvia darcii, looking quite spectacular here with this brilliant colouring. The most intense scarlet, and one of the more contrasting of the salvias beside it, Salvia discolor, which has greyish silvery calyces and grey foliage with very whitish stems here. And heading out of this bay, we come past the Mountains House, which is sadly closed at the moment. Taking in the wonderful Myrtus luma or Luma appendiculata, which has scented flowers. So this is one of the myrtles. This is a Chilean form of myrtle, and just worth taking in as well and peering under the canopy to admire this beautiful flaking bark on these brilliant russet coloured stems. We now head to the Mediterranean. So here we have plantings of some of the tender lavenders. So this is Lavandula minutolii var tenuipinna, Euphorbia mellifera, here creating a dense mound. A lovely spot to take in the sun. One of the margaritas, Argyranthemum spur, and more lavenders. So here we have Lavandula bucchii var gracili, another member of the Lamiaceae, and you can see here the flowers almost spiralling in towers above the grey foliage here. And peering again into the New Zealand Australasian Bay, lots and lots of texture here. A rogue Echium pinninina has erupted from the Mediterranean in this bay, and the forms of callistemon and lomandra can be seen here. Past DIANELLA revoluta, peering into the Continents Apart house and heading round for our last hit of flower in the bays today. So a few flowers of one of the pineapple lilies. This is Eucomis camosa from South Africa, which is a member of the hyacinth family. One of the agapanthus. This is headborn, one of the headborn hybrids. The beautiful foliage of Melianthus major just erupting here. And as we wander along, finishing with the late flowers of Nymphophia ruperi, again a South African species. So one of the red hot pokers. And one of the late autumn flowering lilies. This is Amaryllis belladonna. And we'll just turn back to look along the side of the glass house before it goes under cover of scaffold for some restoration and renovation work. And a glance taking in some of the Mediterranean beds. Again, I hope you've enjoyed this week's Wellness Wander, and thank you for joining me.